morning, everyone, and welcome to News in Motion, the podcast. Yes, you will see there's a change in the name from Mimosa Fridays. We're making this change because this year we're wanting to focus more on the headlines and to equip and to empower as well as to encourage you in your life's journey. I am your host, Gail Dudley, and today I want to talk about the reasons why. And today's topic is going to focus on the reasons why we must register to vote, then go out at the appointed time to vote. So I want to really give you a moment to grab pen and paper so that you can take notes, or maybe you're going to play this later today or tomorrow or next week or next month. And I'm going to give you a lot of resources during this time. I'm going to give you a lot of resources. So let's get started. Well, y'all, the reasons why we must register to vote and then vote is so that our voices can be heard. So that our voices can be heard. Now, personally, and what I've heard from people within my circle of influence is that my role is someone um, who's on an assignment, if you will, to equip and to encourage and to empower. It's about building relationships. It's about giving you the tools that you need to research candidates, to get an understanding of the bills that are on the table, to have a better clarity of some of the definitions, example, the filibuster, or the closure rule, or the bird rule, or the carve out rule, and the many bills that are out there right now that are restricting people with the access to vote without having to jump through so many hoops. You're also going to hear me talk about the importance of becoming a poll worker. Today, that is very, very, very important to do so. So, I want to start with this and talk about between January the 1st and December the 7th of 2021. There are at least 19 states that have passed 34 laws restricting access to voting. Okay, again, 19 states which have passed 34 laws restricting access to voting. Let me stop right there. Many people will think, oh, that doesn't apply to me. Well, it may not apply to you directly, but what about your family? What about your friends? What about your coworkers? Think about your elderly, if you have elderly parents or grandparents or aunts or uncles or friends. Think about if you attend a church, different people and segment in the church. Think about the people who leave the cold climate and they travel to some of the warmer climates, such as Arizona or California or Florida. Think about their access to voting. Think about mail in ballots. Think about the drop boxes. Think more than just you going in late to your job because you're in line to vote, or you leaving your job to go vote, or maybe you're a stay at home dad or mom and you have that opportunity to pack up the children and go vote. I want you to look beyond your yourself and the access that you have, and start thinking about and considering other people, regardless of race, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of socioeconomic status, regardless of educational level, regardless of you fill in the blank. Okay, so again, we have at least 19 states that have passed 34 laws restricting access to voting. Now, y'all, here's another staggering number: more than 440 bills with provisions that restrict voting access has been introduced in 49 states during the 2021 legislative sessions. Now, I understand we're now in 2022, but many of those bills will be carried over, hear me, to this year. Now, I want you to write down this resource because don't just take my words for it. I want you to also research this yourself. One thing I do with News in Motion Monday through Thursday at 7:25 a.m., where I go on live on video and also on audio, I share with people that don't just listen to that media talking head, which I am one of them, but go and do the research. Hear keywords, ask the tough questions of yourself, and do the research to find out yourself. Now, here's the other thing: don't go to satire, go to actual news media news sources and outlets. Go to journalists that you trust. Again, not with all the propaganda, but with relevant commentary. And with News in Motion, my tagline is that we're giving you relevant commentary with a call to action mixed with the inspirational message. That's what we do. That's what I do. And it's about pulling out the facts. So, here are some things when we talk about civic engagement, and here are the reasons why we must register to vote. Civic engagement is understanding and utilizing the dynamics of power, negotiation, networking, organizing, and empathy to achieve objectives while making an impact. That's voting. That's voting. That's why I talk about civic engagement and partnership with voting. That's what it is. And that is important. All right, you ready to take down some resources? As I unpack this, I want to give you some resources. One is rockthevote.org. Rockthevote.org. And these will all be in the show notes. So don't worry if you don't grab them, they will be in the show notes. Another one is USA.gov. USA.gov. Vote.gov. Vote.gov. Whenweallvote.org. Whenweallvote.org. Now, as you're doing that and writing those things down, I want you to consider becoming a poll worker. And that's a poll worker is that person who works the polling location during an election. Now, let me be honest with you and tell you it's an extremely long day, but it is civic engagement and it can be very rewarding. Now, some states will offer a stipend. There's training that you get, but do it because it's civic engagement, even if you do receive a stipend. So there's training that goes along with that. Why am I asking you to register to become a poll worker? I'm asking you to register because in the marginalized and those communities that are below the poverty line, those are the first polling locations that close when they do not have enough workers to work a polling location. Once the pandemic hit, let me give you some background behind that. Once the pandemic hit in 2020, what happened is it eliminated the elderly individuals who made it a point to work polling locations year after year after year after year. Personally, I remember my grandmother being a poll worker. She has since passed away, but she would get dressed up. She would get her what back in those days they would call them pantyhose. She would get her pantyhose on. She would have her pearls on. She would have what they called in that day her pocketbook. She would have her hat on. She would have her makeup on, her red lipstick, and she would make her way to the polling location to be a poll worker. That was her civic duty. That gave her pride, especially as an African American female. That would just give her pride. And if she knew that I used the term African American, she would be rolling over in her grave. She had no problem calling herself a Black woman. She had no problem calling herself a Negro woman. That is my grandmother, or that was my grandmother. There was pride behind those terms, but that's veering me off to another direction. So let me come back. But I just wanted to explain that to you. She and her friends and other people would come together and work the polls. There was, again, a pride behind her civic engagement. Well, Now that the pandemic is upon us, and we're going into year 3 of the pandemic, the elderly and those who had this love for going to the polls, they're no longer working the polls. So they're needing some younger people to come along and work the polls. Well, because there is a decrease in poll workers, many states, and it's sad to say, many Secretary of State officials are um, looking at areas where they will close. So I will not use the word they're targeting those areas, but those are the first polling locations that are closing, which means these marginalized people, these people who may not have transportation or the resources or funds to do so, they're choosing and opting not to vote because they have no way to get there. Maybe the closest polling location that they've been assigned to vote is 20 miles away. Even if it's 3 miles away, and let's say they're not on a bus line, how do they get there? So that's why I'm encouraging you to become a poll worker. You can register to become a poll worker by going to www.eac.gov, and that stands for the Election Assistant Commission. So the eac.gov. Now, here's 8 things that we can do as you're listening in to this podcast today. Number one, I want to give a challenge or call to action, if you will, to register at least one person to vote. Let's not worry about getting them to the polls at this moment. Let's just focus on registering people to vote. Now, hear me. I don't care if you're blue state, red state, purple state, green state, whatever color state. I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat, Green Party, or Independent. The key is to use your voice and vote. I don't care your partisan politics or your policies or your ideology. I want you to register to vote. So, check number one, check with your circle of influence to see who may not be a registered voter. If I'm speaking to you, I'm encouraging you to vote. You can go to vote.gov and register. You can go to usa.gov and register. You can go to whenweallvote.org and register. You can go to your Secretary of State website and register. It takes less than 2 minutes to register. So that's the first thing. The second thing I want you to focus on this week is to contact the high school in your community and ask if you can do a session with the seniors and take in voting cards for them to register to vote. Take in voting registration cards for them to register to vote. Or while you're in the classroom, put the website up on the whiteboard or the smart board or whatever board is in the classroom and ask them to pull out their smartphones or their tablets or their computers and do it electronically. Anyone who will be turning 18 come the 2022 primary can go ahead and register right now to vote. You don't have to wait. The third thing is to contact the college in your area and do the same thing. The fourth thing, begin having conversations with your friends, family, and coworkers to help them understand what's going on. See, so often we just focus on the voting cycle, we focus on the candidates, and we do not dig into, well, what's on the table? What are the conversations that are happening in the chambers of the Senate or the House? What's happening on your local level? Never skip out on local elections. Don't do that. Understand the 440 bills I just spoke about. You again Google it to see what they are. Number 5, don't give up. Don't give up. For so many people, again, regardless of what side of the aisle you're on, many of us are becoming very frustrated. We are constituents and we're saying we sent you to this office. We are the taxpayers who are paying this, but all you want to do is bicker and fight. What's being passed in these chambers? Now hear me. One thing that we can do, and I'm just giving you a lot in this particular podcast, but I'm going to come through over the coming weeks to break down each section, excuse me. But one thing that we can do you know that you can research candidates? You can research their voting record. You can research if they have abstained. You can research to see if they voted present. And again, I'll break all of that down in another podcast because all of those key things are very important. Normally, when a person is voting present or they abstain, they don't want to make the choice of voting yes or no for a bill. And that should concern you. That should concern you. Another thing you can do, many of us are not doing this today, but we should add the word advocate to our bio. Let people know what are you doing when it comes to civic engagement and volunteerism. That's very important. That's the community service that many high schoolers and college students now have when they, as a question, when they go to be interviewed for a job. Attend virtual town hall meetings, and then write your representative. These are just 8 things that you can do that I wanted to share with you today. Um, Now, get in the habit, for those of you who are registered voters, get in the habit of checking your voting registration. Now, I personally encourage people to check once a month. I check on the 3rd of every month. And believe it or not, there's been times I've never missed a voting season. I always vote. Even if there's only one issue on the ballot, I go and vote. I go and vote. There was a time that I got purged from voting, stating that I haven't voted in like 2 election cycles. I was like, what? So I had to contact the Secretary of State's office. They had to review my record and they realized they purged me by mistake. So get in a habit of checking your voting registration. It takes less than 2 seconds to do that. It takes less than 2 seconds to do that. Now, here's an app that I want to suggest to everyone. This app is called the Party of Lincoln app. Download this app on your device. Again, today I'm giving you a lot of resources and I will unpack these things as we go along in the coming weeks for the NIM podcast, the News in Motion podcast. This is the Party of Lincoln app. Download this to your smart device. And also visit the KarenHunterShow.com. The KarenHunterShow.com. Let me tell you some things that you will find on her show. You can find the voting rights petition that's there, although we know that did not pass in the Senate last week, but it's there. You can check your voting guide. So if you want to understand what's coming up in your local or national elections, this is on her app. This is like the go-to app that you can find everything. You can view the election map. You can view the election map. And there's so much that's happening on the map right now when it comes to redistricting. For example, this is a finalized redistricting map, but has been opposed. Right now, the states are Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, Georgia, Idaho, Michigan, North Carolina, and Washington. These are redistricting maps that are proposed but not finalized. The states are Connecticut, Florida, Hawaii, Kansas, Kentucky, Maryland, Minnesota, Mississippi, Missouri, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, South Carolina, Tennessee, Vermont, Wisconsin, and Wyoming. No map currently is the state of Louisiana. And the 2 states that so far the redistricting maps have been overturned are found in Ohio and in Alabama. Why am I sharing that with you? Because I believe that the voters should be the one voting on the elected officials and not the elected officials determining the voters. Again, that doesn't matter where your politics stand. Republican, Democrat, Independent, or Green Party. We should be voting for our elected officials. It should not be the other way around. And you should know, if I called off your state, which I'm sure I did, make sure you're seeing what is the redistricting map. What does it include? So that's on the Karen Hunter app. You can register to vote on her app. You can change party affiliations from that app. Again, it's called the Party of Lincoln app. You can research your local politics. You can even run for office on this particular app. And again, I'll break this down more and more as we go along. Um, you can contact members of Congress from the app. You can contact local election offices from that app. You can track Congress legislation. You can automate your political activism, meaning your civic engagement. You can sign up for different things that you can do right there in your local community and go forth from there. You can check the facts. So even if the president has a speech or a press conference, you can go to her app and check to see what was factual, what was a little factual, and what was a lie. You can check the different polls. You can check the voter ID laws for your state. You can check the state's redistricting guidelines. You can check the Constitution. You can take a civic practice test. Yes, you can on this app. You can even become a poll worker from her app. So even going outside of the eac.gov, you can do this right from the Party of Lincoln app. You can become a poll worker. You can make a Freedom of Information Act request. You can report issues in your neighborhood, and you can also grade the members of Congress. You can. The other thing you can do, you can get powerful civic and history lessons from your own historians, legal experts, and political activists. Now, y'all, again, this podcast is to give you resources. A lot of students, a lot of classrooms join me on my morning News in Motion show, which is at 7:25 Eastern time, or you can watch the replay. You can find that by going to Facebook, facebook.com/news in motion. Again, the links are going to be in the show notes. You can also go to my YouTube. Please subscribe. My YouTube is www.youtube.com/Gail Dudley. That's GAIL. D as in David, U, D as in David, LEY. Again, that information will be in the show notes. I'm sharing that with you because a lot of students are tuning in from high school and colleges, because I am calling one of my segments called Classes in Session. And when I talk about classes in session, I'm breaking these things down. I have been teaching high schoolers up to people who are age 71 about the filibuster. And people said, although they've heard it in other news sources, they never heard it broken down the way I have shared it. I am available to be a speaker or a panelist. Right now, I'm doing everything virtually for the most part. We do have high schoolers that are tuning in a whole classroom at a time. A couple of weeks ago, we had 42 high schools around the U.S. tune in as I talked about the carve-out rule. Yes. To get people to understand these things. There's so much I'm going to impact here, going to share here, and hopefully I'm going to impact communities through this News in Motion podcast. So we're making a pivot coming from the mimosas, the Mimosa Fridays, where I talked about mimosa recipes, and we had all kinds of wonderful conversations. We're still going to have some of that, but we're also going to focus on voting rights. We're going to focus on voter education. We're also going to talk about civic engagement, nonprofit management, causes, a call to action. And we're also going to have a foundation in many of our podcasts around prayer, because I really do believe prayer is a foundation as we are moving forward. We are still going to talk about entrepreneurship and life application. So all of this is coming to you on this podcast. I believe that after you try something out and you figure out what's working for you, that's where you land. And that is where I have landed. So next week, please join back to the podcast as I really break down civic engagement. I'm going to break down civic engagement. I'm going to talk about the political change within communities. I'm going to talk about how to raise funds for communities. I'm going to talk about business research. I'm going to talk about how you craft and tell your story. I'm going to talk about the platform where there is a proclamation, there is a provision, there is a purpose, there is a prophecy. I'm going to talk about different movements. All of this is going to come to you next week leading up to the coming weeks. If you have not heard, there's a new initiative called Power and Partnership. I'm doing it with two amazing women, Gina Winks of Jinx Media and Molly Huggins of the Green Glass Pen. The three of us are coming together. It's called the Power and Partnership. We're coming together to help launch people into media, whether that's podcasting, live broadcasts, or blogs. Check it out by going to my website. That link is going to be in the show notes. You don't want to miss this opportunity to join us. And one last thing before I sign off today. We are looking for sponsors. We are looking for people to partner with us. So if you have a business, a nonprofit, an organization, an initiative that you would like to share with the world, please contact myself, Gail Dudley. You can email me at newsinmotionwithgail@gmail.com. Again, that information is going to be in the show notes, and we will send you advertisement, sponsorship information. We hope you consider joining us. Now, if you would like to join me on this podcast or on one of the live video shows, again, use that email and let me know. There's also going to be a jot form link to let me know your area of expertise. So check us out. All right, y'all. This has been Gail Dudley, your host of the News in Motion, the podcast, Gail Dudley, where I tell everyone time and time again to stay well and to remember to make some bold moves. Until next week, I hope you have enjoyed this podcast. Please communicate with us. Do me a big favor. Download this podcast, subscribe to this podcast, and share it with someone else. You have a great week.
Are you ready to raise awareness of your brand, product, or service? Gail, the host of News in Motion, is an influencer who brings attention to every product she mentions. She started out with a few followers and is growing her base daily. Listeners tune in Monday through Friday from around the U.S. and beyond. Let Gail help you expand and connect with new customers from all around. To get your brand, product, or services mentioned on her shows, just contact info.gaildudley@gmail.com to request her media deck. Catch Gail each weekday on News in Motion on Facebook Live at facebook.com/newsinmotion or her YouTube at youtube.com/Gail Dudley. You can also follow Gail on Instagram and Twitter at Gail Dudley and visit her website, www.gaildudley.com. Until next week, as Gail always signs off, stay well and remember to make some moves.